So I was talking to Naomi Mullenby from the library, and I generally do things with her in terms of have exhibitions and things. And she's well known my admiration for Robin Boyd, and thought that my last semester might be the ideal opportunity to stick the boots in one more time, basically.
Okay, so that's a book written by Robin Boyd, and then it's about critique the Australian architecture aesthetics. And well, as far as I know, it's about like criticizing about being too futurism, as in don't like looking to things as what they are, but didn't really synthesize a lot, and then just like it's too easy to be interpreted. That's my understanding.
Some people told me that some Australian buildings that is have the similar style with the European buildings, and someone also told me that maybe some Australian buildings would like to build some modern styles. I don't know what's the directly meaning of the Ugliness in Australian buildings, but maybe in the future I will know.
Australian Ugliness was Robin Boyd's most famous book. Here it is here. Here's my ripped about copy. It was published in 1960, and what it does is critique the post-war 1950s Australian suburb. Boyd certainly concluded that there wasn't much value out there, that it was all pretty bad, pretty ugly. He came up with a term featureism, which, things sort of, he didn't like things drawing attention to themselves. So he was very negative about the Australian suburbs. I have a letterbox that looks like a big sunflower. He would have hated that kind of thing. Where others, like Robert Venturi, like Denise Scott Brown, were much more positive about what was happening in their neck of the woods, in that case Philadelphia in America, and were trying to be positive about things and trying to actually learn from people's experiences. Whereas I think Boyd believed that he knew, what was right. And from that point of view, I think he was an aesthete. He wanted to tell people how they should live. He wanted to sort of prescribe a kind of aesthetic that he thought was much more appropriate than others. And this particular aesthetic, certainly I didn't grow up with, and it always occurred to me that it was sort of a very narrow view of the Australian suburbs, that it was not really how people lived, and so that's what this particular book was about. But the fact that the Australian Ugliness is still in print, just astounds me, because I don't think it has great relevance at all to what's happening in the suburbs today, if it ever did. Look, I'm hoping that students get out of the exercise reframing the Australian ugliness. It gives them an opportunity to actually look at the Australian suburbs, remembering that many of these students are from overseas, and the fact that they have to think about the Australian Ugliness and think about Boyd and think about the Australian suburb, and in a sense try and boil that down to a visual response, a kind of sculptural response. There's a lot of discipline involved in actually doing that and presenting it to the public and sort of saying, do you agree with me? Don't you agree with me? Do you actually get what I'm trying to say here? I mean, I think from an architect's point of view, that's their important exercises and certainly, valuable as far as architecture students go.
I feel like a lot of things we talk about in this subject, we naturally neglected during the course of architecture, as in the everyday arts and then even the mailbox. No one really looked that much as in like a official studying of architecture. But then like in this course, Duran just gives it a lot of emphasis into it. And I feel like it's just going to give me a lot of inspirations for my future design. That's something I'm really looking forward, yeah.
I studied in Melbourne, and that is my first year study architecture here. So I just want to know more about the information which related to the Australian buildings.
What I've asked the students to do is to actually go to an op shop, find a book that is similar in size to the first edition of the Australian Ugliness, and buy that, so it can be anything, and then design a new dust jacket for that book that in a sense reflects their reading of the Australian Ugliness. It might be positive, it might be negative, and then inside to actually do an artist book or an altered book, some sort of sculptural intervention there in the book that reflects on Robin Boyd, the architect. So that's what the project entails. Those things will be exhibited at the Architecture Library at the University of Melbourne, and as I say, this year is 2019 is Boyd's centenary, and so it was part of the things that were being done for that, and I think it's nice that it takes a kind of alternative approach rather than just a sort of another sycophantic kind of view of Boyd, to at least look at him, and if it's critical, well, it's critical.
I don't really agree with what Duran sort of argues. I kind of saying the value of Robin Boyd. So in the altered book sections, I did for the left half of the book, I did a terrace house, the facade and the interior, but then really focusing on the decoration and the personalized alteration of the house. But then on the right side, I actually did a house designed by Robin Boyd. So I carved out the books and then trying to show the contrast between these two methodologies of design. And then through that, I kind of see the value of Robin Boyd's argument, saying that architecture shouldn't be limited to the decoration, and then there are more things to be considered rather than the facade. There are internal arrangement, the experience, the sequence, and everything. So it's like through that process, I kind of clearing out my argument towards like my position towards this Robin Boyd.
The most interesting thing is I use glasses and I broke it and put it because I think that the book, the Australian Ugliness, that is the reflection of the history. So some people may use their glasses to watch the previous history. So I think the glasses, that is the funny funny topic to put it. Yes, I just think about that.
So the argument saying that a Robin Boyd cannot design, I think is totally wrong. So I feel like he gives me a bit of information, like inspirations for house design. So I think he would be one of the architects I admire too.
But I think every people, every student would admire some concepts, some topic from these books, but they may give some negative feedbacks when we read it. When we learning the popular architecture and design, we all know some small that's popular, but that is was learning buildings during this project. That is the good way for us to earn more information, yes, and enrich our architecture learning life. Yes.
I don't think it's a deeper understanding. I feel like it's just a broader understanding. Say, like the warriors I mentioned before, and then there are the TV shows, the Monkeys series. So I watched the film The Hat, and it's so surreal but then funny at the same time.
Hopefully they'll get some understanding of the kind of history of perhaps everyday design in Australia and some opportunity to actually see it. Many of the students are from overseas, and really it's a good excuse for them, I guess, to look at the suburbs, the Australian suburbs. That, I think, in a sense, is part of the appeal of popular architecture and design, that it's an excuse for people to actually try and engage with Australian everyday life and popular culture.